Okay. Hey everyone, Matt Binkowski here. Welcome to episode 5. We started this series talking about production, the last stage of video game production process. And that was because that's where most teams find themselves in trouble. Production should be all about execution, about making content for your game. Then we talked about pre-production, which was really about how are you going to build your game, about figuring out your benchmarks, tools, and pipelines so that you're ready for production. Next, we talked about concept stage, which was about what game you're trying to build. And so we talked about building vision for your game, defining player fantasy, player experience, and prototyping your core gameplay experience. Finally, today we're talking about why. A word of warning, because today's topic might not be so sexy, but it's a very, very important one. Today, we're talking about business. Now, I believe some of you might be like, oh, Jesus, I really don't want to hear about this. And I get it. There's a number of reasons why the business of video games has this kind of rotten feeling to it.
And the game award goes to, oh man, I have to pay a microtransaction to unlock. That's so stupid.
These game companies treat their workers like pedestrians in Grand Theft Auto.
Turned out our testing did not show a big part of the issues you experience while playing the game.
It's all about the money. It's all about the dum dum da da dum dum. I don't think it's funny.
And we all rather keep it clean and talk about creativity and art. But here's the thing. If video games are your profession, if it is your business, or if you're thinking about making business out of video games, you need to hear this. I promise to make things as easy to digest as possible, and we're going to focus on the most important aspects of the whole deal. We're going to talk about things that every developer needs to know about business. First things first. It might sound obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. You see, video games business is a business like any other business. That's a lot of business. That means you have customers, and that means you have competition. And you need to have a good understanding of both if you want to stand a chance in that immensely competitive market. Every year, there's thousands of games coming out. Big games, small games, great quality, bad quality. It's a really loud industry. And if you really think about it, it's actually quite intimidating to compete in that space. So where do you even begin? One of the most common mistakes I've seen over the years is focusing on just one game, the one you're developing right now. And this might sound crazy, but you should be looking way further ahead. If you are the person running the business, you should be thinking about your game number 3. What? You see, depending on your ambition, that future game is going to have particular quality and scope. So for example, if one day you're thinking about being able to make a game like Call of Duty or God of War, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need a team that's big enough, so you'll need to hire some people. And not just any people. You're going to need to hire or grow experts in particular fields, like technology, art, level design, system design, narrative, sound, QA. And then on top of that, to deliver a game of such magnitude, you're going to need great tech, great tools, and very efficient production pipelines. And of course, all of this is not just going to happen magically. You have to work your way up there. If you know your direction, if you know where you want to be in like 5 to 10 years, you can make sure that the product you're building now can be the step in the right direction. You want to make sure that you're spending time and money on something that can become foundation for your next big thing. Let's look at some companies and games that are really successful. Apex Legends, done by Respawn Entertainment. These guys spent a lifetime mastering first-person shooters. If we look at Stellaris or Europa Universalis, it's made by Paradox, guys who spent years mastering strategy gameplay. Or if we look at Hades, it's coming from Supergiant Games, guys who spent a number of years mastering action and narrative. You see, the really successful companies have focus. Each of their game is based on learnings from the previous ones. So as you look at your long-term strategy, you want to define business objectives for the current project, so that as you analyze ideas coming your way, you can make sure which one fits your business objectives the best. Let's look at some examples. Obviously, you want to be specific about your budget and possible release date. You can say something like, we want a game that we can build for this much money and that we can release in this amount of time. But you should also define a genre and the skills, tools, and pipelines that you hope to develop. So for example, if you hope to eventually make open world games, you might want to spend time with a product that allows you to develop geometry streaming technology. Maybe you want to have something that will allow you to build expertise in third-person animations. Or maybe you want to be able to tell great stories, so you want to spend time making a game that heavily utilizes narrative, environmental storytelling, dialogue, and so on and so on. Whatever it is you want, be specific and make sure you're spending time building expertise in the right areas. Of course, setting business goals goes beyond that. For example, you might want to think about goals for your brand. You see, by making a game, you're making a name for yourself, for your studio. So what do you want to be known for? What do you stand for? Another thing, how are you going to market and sell your game? Are you going to do it yourself or do you need help? What about community? Do you want one? Who's going to take care of it? Same thing with PR. The best thing about specifying goals like that is that you can review them every week and ask yourself, who's taking care of this? Are we on track? Is there anything in our way? What's the next step to achieve that goal? This is what you do as the person running the business. And if you happen to be a small team and you're the developer and a business person at the same time, well, tough luck, man. Making games is difficult, and now you have 2 jobs and you have to take care of both of them. Deal with it. Okay, so we covered step 1, strategy and business objectives. Now, the next step is to understand the market and your competition. First, you identify a niche. How do you do that? Well, you look at the market from a number of different angles. For example, one angle could be production value. Looking at the market from the production value perspective, we can easily see a group of products that so-called full price or AAA games for $60, like Call of Duty, Doom, Overwatch, Destiny. Now the question is, do you have the team, skills, tools, pipelines to deliver $60 value? Maybe yes, maybe no. Let's assume you don't, so we keep digging. There's a group of products with medium production value, like Vermintide or Payday or Alien Isolation, $30, $40 games. You can clearly see that, the quality is not so high, and also these games offer less content. And finally, we can also spot a group of games for like $10 to $12 with low production value and even less content. So knowing all this, you have to pick your spot. The next step is to look at another angle. And that angle is, how do you actually play, or what is the primary motivation? If we look at the market from that perspective, we can, for example, see that we have games that focus on narrative very heavily, like Firewatch and Ethan Carter. But right next to them, we can see very similar games, yet they have their own niche, horror games. These are games like Layers of Fear or Soma. And then we also have a niche of products that focus on the puzzle aspect, like Portal, Talos Principle, and The Witness. So you need to think about which niche do you want to get into and which one would be the best fit for your game and the skills that you have in your team. And if we're done with this, now it's time to really dig into your competitors. What is it that they do very well, and what are the things that could be improved? This is how you look for a possible market gap. Ideally, you want to position yourself in a situation where you can say, hey, we're meeting expectations of the market, but our product also brings something original. And specifically, here's what we can do better than everybody else, and here's how we innovate. All right, so now that we covered business objectives and then understanding your market and your competitors, it's time we talk about audience. You see, every game is made for specific people. People play games for very specific reasons. And I don't know anyone better to explain this other than Nikki. Take a look.
Here's the model that emerged from the data that we got. We identified 12 unique motivations that clustered into 6 pairs. Every column contains motivations that are highly correlated, and motivations in different columns are less correlated. Most of these should feel fairly familiar and straightforward, so let me go through them briefly. Under action is the appeal of chaos and mayhem in exciting, fast-paced gameplay contexts. Under social are both competition and the interest in collaboration and socializing. Mastery is about long-term planning and thinking. So whether that's practicing a game to take on the highest difficulty challenges or the enjoyment of strategy, thinking and planning ahead, making complex decisions. Achievement are different ways of getting points in the context of the game, whether it's points for the sake of points as in achievements, stars, trophies, or points in the sense of power, leveling up your character as quickly as possible, getting powerful equipment and gear. Immersion are different ways of becoming embedded in the story of the world, whether that's the sheer sense of being immersed, being someone else, somewhere else, or engaging with an elaborate plot, with interesting characters, with deep backstories. And finally, creativity is the appeal of making the game your own in different ways, whether that's creating a unique avatar, customizing your spaceship, customizing your city, or discovery, playing the game in the broadest sense of the word. So for example, in World of Warcraft, these are the people who may swim out to the edge of the ocean just to see what happens when you're on the edge.
Be sure to watch the whole talk, it's mind-blowingly good. Link in the description. Okay, so one thing is to understand the motivations of the players, and the other thing is that you also need to specify if you're dealing with casual group, mid-core, or hardcore one. For example, games like Dark Souls or Sekiro, they're really good at what they do being action games, but the learning curve is so steep and those games are so unforgiving that it makes them suitable only for a very specific group of people. Another interesting example is pretty much what Blizzard does with every single game. They take something hardcore, like Magic the Gathering, and then they try to make it more accessible so that a large group of people can play it, and they come up with Hearthstone. Understanding your audience is absolutely crucial because it directly influences the shape of your game, the features you're going to implement. For example, if you look at how you manage inventory in games like PUBG or Escape from Tarkov, it's pretty hardcore. But then if you look at Fortnite, things are way more simple, and that's because Fortnite is going after a different crowd. So whenever you're having a discussion about should we introduce this feature or not, or if something should work one way or the other, always remember your audience. It's not about what you like, it's what's best for your audience. So let's wrap it up. You start developing your game with why. You think about your long-term strategy, and you define business objectives for the current game. Then you carefully analyze and define your audience, and you spend time researching the market, looking at your competitors, trying to spot a market gap. Armed with all this, you proceed to the concept stage to define what game you're going to build. You develop your game's vision, you define player fantasy, player experience, you prototype your gameplay, and you analyze any risks that you need to tackle in pre-production. Next, you go into pre-production and you figure out how you're going to build all this. You deliver a benchmark to establish the quality, and you build tech, tools, pipelines to be able to run production efficiently. And finally, after all this effort, you go into production, you build all the content, and eventually ship your game. That's the whole process. And obviously, things are not that simple. Making games is hard and it takes a lot of effort both in craftsmanship and project management. I hope that by going through all those episodes, you can see a method to the creative madness called video games. And I also hope that you can see that a lot of problems that show up in the late stages, in the production stage, can actually originate from not doing your homework early on. All right, and that's it for this episode. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you next time.